The 20th Amendment, fixing America's lame duck problem. The 20th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified on January 23, 1933. It solved a big problem that had bothered America for 145 years. Politicians who lost elections kept their power for way too long. When the Constitution was written in 1787, the Founding Fathers left some important details unclear. The Founders set up terms of office for House members, senators, and the President, but they didn't say exactly when those terms would start. They also required Congress to meet at least once a year, starting on the first Monday in December. New Hampshire became the required 9th state to ratify the Constitution on June 21, 1788, making the Constitution effective pursuant to Article 7. Before the Constitution became effective, America was still operating under the Articles of Confederation, with the Continental Congress, officially called the Congress of the Confederation, as the government. Since the Constitution's framers couldn't predict when it would be ratified, they had given the existing Congress under the Articles the authority to set the start date for the new government. On September 13, 1788, the Continental Congress chose March 4, 1789, as the date for the new government to begin operations under the Constitution. The Constitution did not go into effect for nearly 10 months after it was ratified, reflecting 18th century travel and communications. This created strange situations that would cause problems for the next century and a half. Presidents elected in November had to wait until March 4th of the next year to take office. That's a 4-month wait! This made sense in the 1700s, when it took a long time to count votes and travel across the country with horses and carriages. As America grew and changed, this long wait between the election and a new presidential term became dangerous. The situation was even worse for members of Congress. Here's how the confusing timeline worked. It's likely that explaining the schedule will make it clear as mud. The Constitution set November of even-numbered years as the time for congressional elections. In December of the same year as elections, the old Congress chosen at the previous election would meet for its final session. Then on March 4th of the year following the November election, the date chosen by the Articles Congress, new congressional terms officially begin, and the most recently elected members would take the oath of office. In December of the year following the previous year's November election, the new Congress finally gets to start its first real session. So, newly elected representatives and senators had to wait over 13 months before they could actually start making laws. The constitutional calendar was an incredible mess. The Founders originally picked December for Congress to convene because most Americans were farmers who needed to finish their harvest before traveling. It took weeks to travel to the Capitol on bad roads. State governments met in winter to choose U.S. senators. This extremely quirky schedule created serious problems. Politicians who lost elections kept making important decisions for months. Newly elected officials couldn't act on what voters wanted. During emergencies, the government response was often delayed. The term lame duck originally came from the London Stock Exchange in the 1700s. It described stockbrokers who couldn't pay their debts and had to waddle out of the alley like a lame duck. Americans started using this term in the 1860s for politicians who had lost elections but were still in office. Like the broke stockbrokers, these politicians were seen as weak and unable to do much. By the early 1900s, several things made these long waits dangerous. It became a faster world, and government had to respond quickly to economic, communication, and social changes. As communications and travel became quicker, waiting 4 months for a new president was too long. This situation allowed politicians who had lost elections to keep making important decisions for very long periods, even though voters had rejected them. Emergency responses. During crises may be needed and the long waits could paralyze government action. When Franklin Roosevelt was elected in November 1932, during the Great Depression, he had no authority to do anything about the country's financial crisis until March 1933. Senator George William Norris from Nebraska was the driving force behind the 20th Amendment in Congress. Norris was a teacher, county attorney, district judge, and 5-term member of the U.S. House of Representatives before he was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1912, and understood the problems of the quirky calendar. The amendment made important changes. For presidential terms, Inauguration Day was moved from March 4th to January 20th, cutting the wait from 4 months to about 2.5 months. For congressional terms, new congressional terms were changed to begin on January 3rd, and Congress convenes the same time. This cut the 13-month wait for Congress to 2 months, greatly reducing lame duck sessions. For presidential succession, the amendment defined what happens if a president-elect dies before taking office, or if no president is chosen by Inauguration Day. The 20th Amendment also solved important problems about the vice president that the original Constitution had ignored. The Founding Fathers had not defined what would happen if a president-elect died before taking office, or other emergencies. The 20th Amendment was actually the second of 3 amendments needed to clarify the role of the vice president. The 12th Amendment in 1804 fixed problems with the election of presidents and vice presidents. Later, the 25th Amendment in 1967 would address what happens if a president becomes unable to do the job while in office. Congress passed the amendment on March 2, 1932. It was ratified incredibly quickly when Georgia, Missouri, Ohio, and Utah all approved it on January 23, 1933. Providing the 36 states needed under the Constitution's Article 5. As a result, Franklin Roosevelt's second inauguration was moved to January 20th, 1937 from March 4th. The 145-year delay to correct the calendar quirks from the Constitution's beginning was so long because people in government benefited from the long waits. They had no reason to change a system that gave them extra time and power. The 20th Amendment made more constitutional changes than any other amendment. The amendment changed when Congress starts meeting and shortened the terms of sitting congressmen and senators. It also changed presidential and vice presidential terms and created rules for the process if a president-elect dies before the new term. Even though the 20th Amendment shortened the time between elections and taking office, presidents still use their final months in office to do things they might not do otherwise. Those 2.5 months for lame duck presidents still leaves time for plenty of mischief. The actions of President Biden following the 2024 election provide an example. From the November 5th, 2024 election to January 20th, 2025, President Joe Biden issued approximately 4,082 individual acts of clemency. This total included the following actions. On December 12, 2024, Biden granted commutations to roughly 1,500 individuals who were on home confinement due to the COVID-19 pandemic and pardoned 39 others. On December 23, 2024, he commuted the sentences of 37 out of 40 federal death row inmates to life in prison without parole. On January 17, 2025, Biden commuted the sentences of nearly 2,500 people. On January 19, 2025, a series of pardons were announced, including preemptive pardons for General Mark Milley, Dr. Anthony Fauci, individuals associated with the House January 6th Committee, and pardons for 5 members of his family. This period saw some of the most significant clemency actions of any presidency, including what the White House called the largest single-day act of clemency in modern history. He also controversially pardoned his son Hunter on December 1, 2024, for federal crimes committed over a 10-year period. This shows that even with the shortened timeline, the lame duck period still gives outgoing presidents significant power to make decisions without worrying about future elections. The 20th Amendment represents one of the most practical fixes in constitutional history. But, though shortened, the lame duck period remains part of the American government structure. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Constitutional Soundbites. Share this video with others and assist in the ongoing work of combating constitutional illiteracy.